Year 1, Part 6. Eventually everything was in readiness, the table beautifully set. Pat made Cuddles take off the tablecloth 3 times before it was smooth enough to suit her. The house full of delicious odors, everybody dressed up except Judy. "I'm not putting on me dress up dress till me dinner is out of the way. I'm not wanting spots on it. When the last dish is washed, I'll slip up and put it on in time for supper. They'll see me in all my grandeur then. Your table do be looking lovely, Patsy, but I'm thinking it would look better if that cherry thing didn't be sitting in the middle of it." I thought it would please Tilly Tuck. He's sensitive, you know, and if it is going to bring us bad luck, it will anyhow. So what matter where it sits? Says she, laughing in her sleeve at the foolish old woman. Oh, we'll be saying, Patsy, Joe hasn't come after all, and I've me own opinion as to what prevented him." Pat looked about happily. Everything was just right. She must run and tie Sid's necktie for him. She loved to do that. Nobody else at Silverbush could suit him. What matter if a cold rain were falling outside? Here it was snug and warm, the smiling rooms full of Christmas magic. Then the old brass knocker on the front door began to go tap tap. The first guests had arrived. Uncle Brian and Aunt Jessie, who hadn't been asked at all, but had just decided to run down in the free and easy clan fashion and bring rich old cousin Nicholas Gardner from New Brunswick, who was visiting them and wanted to see his relatives at Silverbush. Pat, as she let them in, cast one wild glance through the dining room door to see if 3 more places could be crowded into the table without spoiling it, and knew they couldn't. The Jerusalem cherry had begun its dire work. Soon everybody had come. Frank and Winnie, Aunt Hazel and Uncle Madison, and all the little Madisons. The 2 stately great aunts, Frances and Honor from the Bayshore farm, Uncle Tom and Aunt Barbara and Aunt Edith, the later looking as disapproving as usual. "Raisin gravy," she sniffed as she went upstairs. "Judy Plum made that on purpose. She knows I can't eat raisin gravy. It always gives me dyspersia." But nobody seemed to have dyspersia at the Christmas table. At first all went very well. A dear gentle lady with golden brown eyes and silvery hair sat at the head, and her smile made everyone feel welcome. Pat had elected to help Judy wait on the table, but everyone else sat down. The children sat at a special table in the little parlor, as was the custom of the caste, and the cocktail course passed off without a hitch. 3 extra cocktails having been hurriedly concocted by Cuddles, who, however, forgot to put a maraschino cherry on them. Of course, Aunt Edith got one of the cherryless ones and blamed Judy Plum for it, and Great Aunt Frances got another and felt slighted. Old Cousin Nicholas got the third and didn't care. He never ate the darn things anyhow. Uncle Tom ate his, although Aunt Edith reminded him that maraschino cherries were apt to give old people indigestion. "I'm not so aged yet," said Uncle Tom stiffly. Uncle Tom did look surprisingly young, as Pat and Judy were quick to note. The once flowing, wavy black beard, which had been growing smaller all summer, was by now clipped to quite a smart little point, and he had got gold-rimmed glasses in place of the old spectacles. Pat thought of those California letters, but put the thought resolutely away. Nothing must mar this Christmas dinner. Though Winnie was telling a story that would have been much better left untold. Judy almost froze in her tracks with horror as Winnie's clear voice drifted out to the kitchen. "It was just after Frank and I were married, you know. I hadn't really got settled down. Unexpected company came to supper one night, and I sent Frank off to the store to get some sliced ham for an emergency dish. I thought it seemed rather pink when I was arranging it on the plate, so nicely with curly little parsley sprays. It did look artistic. Frank helped everybody and then took a bite himself. He laid down his fork and looked at me. I knew something was awfully wrong. But what? I stopped pouring the tea and snatched up a mouthful of ham. What do you think? Winnie looked impishly around the table. That ham was raw. Shouts of laughter filled the dining room. Under cover of the noise, Pat dashed out to the kitchen, where she and Judy had a silent rage. They had laughed themselves when Winnie had first told the tale at Silverbush, but to tell it to all the world was a very different thing. Oh, the disgrace of having Edith and Mrs. Bryan hear of it, moaned Judy. But never be hard on her, Patsy. I do be knowing too well what loosened her tongue. And were you noticing that Cuddles put the slim grain chair out of the little parlour for your Uncle Brian, and it cracked in one leg? Every time I've seen the crack widening a bit, and the good man above only knows if it'll last out the mail. And here's Tilly Tuck skulking because he slipped on the floor and fell on his dog. He's been vowing I spilt a little gravy right in his corner, the great clumsy. But it's time to be taking in the soup. And then, as if it had been waiting for Judy's words as a cue, the Jerusalem cherry showed what it could really do when it gave its mind to it. It seemed as if everything happened at once. Tillytuck, made sulkier still by Judy's speech, opened the door and stalked furiously out into the rain. Uncle Tom's wet, dripping Newfoundland, who had followed the Swallowfields folks over, dashed in. Just Dog simply couldn't stand that after being fallen on. He flew at the intruder. The two dogs rolled in a furry avalanche right against Pat, who had started for the dining room door bearing a tray full of soup plates full of a delicious brew that Judy called chicken broth. Down went poor Pat in a frightful melee of dogs, broken plates, and spilled soup. Hearing the din, everyone, except Cousin Nicholas, rushed out of the dining room. Aunt Hazel's 2-year-old baby began to shriek piercingly. Aunt Edith took a heart attack on the spot. Judy Plum, for the first and only time in her life, lost her head, but lost it to good purpose. She grabbed a huge pepper pot from the dresser and hurled the contents full in the faces of the writhing, snarling dogs. It was effective. The Newfoundland tore loose, dashed wildly through the dining room, ruining Aunt Jessie's new blue georgette dress as he collided with her, tore through the hall, tore upstairs, ran into a delicately papered pastel wall, tore down again, and escaped through the front door, which Billy Madison had presence of mind enough to open for him. As for Just Dog, he had bolted through the cellar door, which had been left open, and struck the board shelf across the steps. Just Dog, shelf, 3 tin pails, 2 stewpans, and a dozen glass jars of Judy's baked damson preserves all crashed down the cellar steps together. It seemed that pandemonium reigned at Silverbush for the next quarter of an hour. Aunt Edith was gasping for breath and demanding a cold compress. She had to be taken upstairs by Aunt Barbara and ministered to. Excitement always brings on that pain in my heart, she murmured piteously. Judy Plum knows that. Uncle Tom and Uncle Brian were in kinks of laughter. Aunt Frances and Aunt Honor looked. This is not how things are done at the Bay Shore. And poor Pat scrambled dizzily up from the floor, dripping with soup, crimson with shame and humiliation. It was Cuddles who saved the situation. Cuddles was superb. She didn't lose her wits for a second. Everybody go back and sit down, she ordered. Buddy, stop yelling. Stop it, I say. Pat, slip up and get into another dress. Judy, clean up the mess. There's plenty of soup left. Pat had only half the servings on the tray, and Judy hid a potful away in the pantry. I'll have it ready in a jacksniff. Shut the cellar door, and keep that dog down there until he gets the pepper out of his eyes. Judy always declared she had never been as proud of anyone at Silverbush as she was of Cuddles at that time. But just at the moment poor Judy was feeling nothing but the bittersweetest humiliation. Never had such a shameful thing happened at Silverbush. Wait till she got hold of Tillytuck. Wait till she could get her hands on that Jerusalem cherry. In a surprisingly short time the guests were back at the table, where Cousin Nicholas had been placidly eating crackers through all the hullabaloo. Cuddles and Judy between them served the soup. Pat came down, clothed and in her right mind once more. Two cats, whose nervous systems had been shattered, fled to the peace and calm of Judy's kitchen chamber. The Jerusalem cherry bided its time. The goose, duck, turkey course was a grand success, and Judy's raisin gravy was acclaimed the last word in gravies. The dessert was amazing, though Cousin Nicholas did manage to upset a jug of sauce over the tablecloth. Judy came in and calmly mopped it up. Judy had got her second wind now, and was prepared for anything. Pat sat down for the dessert, and there was laughter. People were to seek Pat from birth till death because she gave them the gift of laughter. Though she had secret worry gnawing at her heart, Aunt Jessie had eaten only 3 spoonfuls of her pudding. Wasn't it good? And Winnie, somehow, wasn't looking just right. She had suddenly become very quiet and rather pale. To Judy's thankfulness, the cracked chair lasted the dinner out, though it creaked alarmingly every time Uncle Brian moved. Then came the grand dishwashing, as Judy called it, in the kitchen. Judy and Pat and Cuddles tackled it gaily. Things weren't so bad after all. The guests were enjoying a good clan pie-jaw in the big parlor, and the children were sitting around Tillytuck in the little parlor, looking up fascinated while he told them stories. Terrible lies, Judy vowed they were. But then Tillytuck had once said, "What a dull fellow I'd be if I never told anything but the truth." Anyhow, he was keeping the young ones quiet, and that was something.